I think so. Yeah. Okay, cool. There was a button. Hey. I know I'm a little bit late today. I had to run out and go see a client before I went live this morning. Okay, so in my last live, I talked about asking for help and how we all need to learn to ask for help. And I think, what I see many times in Bookkeeper Training School and in Power Bookkeeper Network is I see people that feel that they can't start because they're waiting for this magical moment in which they're going to know everything. Right? Do you have that? And I know that a whole bunch of you that are already enrolled in the course, you've expressed this to me. I feel like I don't know enough. I need to know more. If I just knew everything, if I just learned, this magic thing, that it would make all the difference. And I think that those two topics are actually related. I think that we are so afraid to ask questions and look like we might not know everything that it stops us dead in our tracks. And so I want to share with you a little bit about what my process looks like when I'm working with clients. So first of all, when I start working with a client every single year, as I'm in the tax side of my business, we send out questionnaires. Okay, lots of questionnaires to gather data from our clients because things are changing all the time. So when you're a bookkeeper, you should have an onboarding questionnaire that goes through all of the important things. So all the contact information for the client, all of the important numbers for the client, all of, do they have payroll? What banks are they working with? How do they bill? How do they take payments? Gather all of this information together, okay, so that you have a good starting point, okay? I can't tell you how many times, I get questions from all over the place, okay? And people will ask me questions about a client that they're working with. I'll say, okay, what type of client are they? How do they file their taxes? And the person doesn't know. And it's like, okay, that's fine. Go find out. And they're resistant to asking the client any questions because they're worried that somehow the client is going to expect you to magically know what tax return they file. But you've never asked them. Okay? And I think that it's critically important that we get over ourselves a little bit and are willing to show a little bit of vulnerability. I'll tell you, when I'm working on clients, there are sometimes that, this is pretty typical that you work on a client and you put together your list of questions and you send the list of questions to a client. I never, ever, ever, okay? I never, ever, ever work on a client where I don't have questions during the process. It is totally normal when you are working on client work to have questions. In fact, if you don't have questions, that sometimes makes me think that you're making too many assumptions. Okay? I always have questions for my clients. Always. Okay? And then what I do is I put together a list of questions, I send it to the client, and you know what sometimes happens? We go through all that information, we get it back, and we realize, oh wait, now we have more questions. And so I think that a lot of people believe that when they get into this business, that they're supposed to know everything. They're supposed to know where everything goes. There's, somehow we have, this magic ability to look at a transaction and immediately know what it's for. And that's just not the case, right? We have to ask questions. We have to get over our fear that we have to be perfect and we have to know everything. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I've been doing this for almost 20 years. It's going to be 20 years in June. And every single client I work on, I've got questions. Every single client, without a doubt, I've got questions. Because in order to do a good job on the client, we have to make sure that we have clarity, that we know where everything goes and what everything is. You are not expected to be a mind reader. You're just not. And clients understand that. It's actually funny because talking to people who have hired bookkeepers, they actually get worried if the bookkeeper doesn't ask questions. Because they're expecting that. They're expecting that you don't know where to put everything. They're expecting that, if you see Amazon charges, you're not going to know where they go. And they kind of get worried if you don't ask questions. Okay, now that's kind of counterintuitive, right? I bet you like a lot of you are thinking, wait, the client's expecting me to have questions? Of course they are. Of course they are. Okay? So I really want you to get comfortable with being inquisitive, with asking questions, with being okay with the fact that you don't need to know everything. Because nobody's going to expect you to know everything. And one of the really awesome things about being in the Empower Bookkeeper Network, which comes with Bookkeeper Training School, you get 6 months in the Empower Bookkeeper Network when you buy Bookkeeper Training School. You get to ask me questions. You get to ask the group questions. Like today, we have a live Q&A call where I go through and I answer all the questions that people have. We have a community site where people can post all of their questions, and they get answered. That's one of the really cool things about having, being in the program, is that you have that backbone. And I think that sometimes, those of you that are my students, sometimes you're not asking the questions. And I want you to remember that is a safe place for you to ask questions and get clarity. And sometimes, it's funny because a lot of times my answer is, I don't know. You have to go ask your client. And I think people get freaked out by that. Go back to what I said a couple minutes ago. You're not expected to know everything. Okay? You're just not. So we can help you with the technical stuff, but, sometimes you just need to go back to the client and ask. All right, so I hope that this was helpful for you. For those of you that are kind of sitting on the fence with Bookkeeper Training School, you're not sure because you're afraid you're not going to know it all. Having that community behind you in the Empower Bookkeeper Network is such a helpful resource to have. And so we'd love to have you check out the course. We'd love to have you be with us. If you have not watched our free training yet, you can go to bookkeepertrainingschool.com. It's linked on the page, and we'd love to have you check it out. I hope you guys have an amazing weekend. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, you do not have to be perfect. You just have to seek out answers. All right, take care. Have a great day.